Listen, I'm not really sure if anyone's going to actually read this, and whether they're going to believe me or not. I have to tell someone, anyone. I feel like I'm going crazy, but I know I'm not, and since I just recently moved, I have no one close by that I can trust to talk to about this without them thinking I'm totally insane. I'd call my mom, but she has enough on her plate right now. I don't need her to get worried. I don't even know if she would believe me, to be honest. And the last thing I need is her to think I've lost it in the new city I'm calling home all alone. So, I guess I'll just start at the beginning. I left my hometown for the big city. No shiny special reason for why, really. I finished school. I've been applying to jobs left and right. Managed to get an interview via video call for an above entry-level position in my field. I guess I nailed it, because within a week I'd gotten the offer. I was packing up what little I had in my parents' old dingy minivan and hopping onto the interstate. I moved into a new apartment in an older but more affordable area of the city. Got settled in for the first month with establishing a new routine and learning my way around my new job. By the second month, I was at ease enough to start branching out and exploring more. Found a nice bar by my work that I began to frequent once a week with a quick drink. Found a local market by my apartment that I started to go to on the weekends for fresh produce. And I joined a nearby gym that boasted quality equipment and being open extra late at night for the busy 9-to-5ers like myself. It's a pretty nice gym, don't get me wrong. The equipment's well maintained and fairly new, and they recently remodeled the locker room. I had absolutely no issue, really, until 4 nights ago, when I decided to go relax in the whirlpool after a particularly grueling session. I soaked for a while, enjoying the jets and the hot water, thinking about nothing in particular, and then hopped out and headed for the locker room, passing by a set of doors I hadn't paid any attention to when I'd entered. I'm still learning the place, so I was unsurprisingly curious, and took a quick peek. One door led to the gym's sauna. The other led to a steam room. I've sat in a sauna before. My old gym had one that I tried a few times. It was nice enough, I suppose. This gym sauna was packed to the max capacity when I looked in, and I made a mental note to check in another time for it. I redirected my gaze to the steam room door and tried to peer inside with no luck. Steam billowed all around inside, and I could barely make out the shape of another gym member sitting on the bench in the room. The steam seemed to distort the figure at times, though I couldn't really focus well on it. I thought about having a quick rinse and going inside to check it out. I'd never sat in a steam room before, and it wasn't nearly as packed as the sauna was. But I was kind of tired already, and still had to shower and eat dinner, so I decided I'd come back the next evening and try it out. I really wish I'd just done the damn sauna instead. Next night, I came back and decided I'd do my workout first before trying out the steam room. I told myself it'd be a nice way to unwind after some good exercise and something to look forward to while I sweat my butt off. Work had run a little late, so I arrived a little later than usual at the gym and found it much emptier than it usually was, which I honestly appreciated. I did my usual routine, made my way to the locker room for a quick rinse, and then threw on a swimsuit and headed out towards the set of doors I'd passed the night prior. I took another peek into the sauna, and there were a few people in there. Not as many as there had been the other night, but still enough that I felt more solidified in my choice of trying out the steam room, which, from what I could see, looked empty. I remember feeling relieved almost, seeing that no one was inside. I could have this first-time experience all to myself, and enjoy a quiet moment of steamy solitude. I opened the door and stepped in, and immediately was greeted by a swath of moisture and heat. The room smelled like old pool water, and as I breathed in, the air felt thick in my throat. There were stone benches up another 2 of the 4 walls of the room, and the floor and the walls were an earthy-colored tile. Steam swirled all around me as I made my way over to one of the benches and sat down, my whole body already slick with sweat and water. I felt my thighs slide against the moist stone beneath me. I jumped as a loud crashing sound suddenly echoed in the room. I looked up at the source of the noise to see steam pouring out of a vent up high close to the ceiling. I realized it was just whatever kind of machinery they had next to the room that must generate the steam, and settled back against the wall. I closed my eyes for a little while, letting myself relax and thinking about how nice, albeit slightly gross, it all felt. Every inch of my body was very much drenched, and it had only been maybe a minute or two. While the thickness of the air had been off-putting at first, I was quickly growing to like how it felt as I breathed. More, even, if that makes sense. I really was rather enjoying myself until I felt something glide along my thigh, ever so slightly, and my eyes shot open. I couldn't see anything. I immediately looked to my left and right. I hadn't heard anyone enter or leave the room, but maybe somebody had? Yet, as I looked around, I saw no one. The steam was pretty much a swirling white haze at that point, and it was nearly impossible to see a foot in front of me. I couldn't make out any figures within the room at all, and when I called out a quick greeting, there was no reply, just my voice and the steam that still billowed out of the vents above me. Was it supposed to stay on that long? As soon as I had the thought, there was another loud clang, and the steam stopped. I let out a deep sigh, trying to ease myself back against the wall. I was imagining things. I had to be. It must have just been a set of moisture droplets running down my thigh is all. That must have been what I felt. Except something felt wrong. I couldn't quite place it, but I honestly had the deepest sensation that I wasn't alone in that room. I had half a mind to just leave at that point. It had felt nice at first, but I was beginning to feel weird. When I tried, though, it almost was like my brain and body were disconnected, and I was rooted to the bench. I just couldn't move. And then I felt it again, only this time it was ever so slight on the back of my neck. And then it started on my right arm, much less subtle this time, and I knew it wasn't moisture droplets dropping onto my skin, primarily because droplets trickle down, and this, whatever it was going up my arm. I wanted to let out a scream, wanted to jump up and run out of there as fast as I could, slippery floor be damned, but I still couldn't move. I couldn't even turn my neck to get a look at what exactly I was feeling. I could only make out what little I could see through the steam from my peripheral vision, which I'm honestly kind of glad now that I couldn't get a better look at whatever it was. I could make out some kind of darkness, some kind of vague mound of shadows, and when I directed my gaze down at my arm, I felt my stomach do a flip. Slimy, black tendrils slithered up my arm. They were thin and stringy looking as they glided even further up my shoulder with ease. They felt moist and radiated heat. It wasn't until I felt them slowly wrapping and tightening around my neck that I started to truly process what was happening. My heart was pounding. I was frozen, my body entirely unresponsive to the commands my mind was screaming at it. And in that moment, I thought I was going to die as my vision began to darken. And then it all went away in an instant as the door swung open and the loud voices cut into the silence of the steam. My arm jerked, and just like that, my limbs were back in action, and I could move. I looked over to see a couple had walked in, chatting about something cheerful and barely noticing me sitting there. The steam was no longer so thick, and as my mind caught up with everything happening, I quickly snapped my head to my right and saw nothing. My heart was still pounding, my throat felt tight, and my legs were feeling like jelly. I got up as quickly as they'd allow me to, without slipping and falling, and made my way unsteadily to the door, the couple still absent-mindedly chattering with one another and not even looking my way. The rest of my time at the gym that night was a blur. I didn't shower there like usual, electing to throw my clothes on quick and shower at home instead. I'd gotten some weird looks from the staff members at the front desk as I made my way out, but honestly didn't care how I looked in that moment. I just wanted to get away. I made it back to my apartment safely, thankfully, and I remember sitting down in my shower and letting the cold water cascade down me. I absolutely did not want anything warm or hot or steamy. I've taken a lot of cold showers since then. Call me crazy, but I actually plan on going back to the gym once I start feeling a little better. Well, a little more sane, I guess. If I even can, which writing this all out for others to read kinda helps. The membership wasn't exactly cheap or refundable, and I do need some sort of physical work, since my job is just hours on hours of sitting and staring at screens. I don't plan on going anywhere near the steam room again, though. In fact, I think I'm going to avoid the entire spa and pool area altogether from now on. If I ever stupidly get the desire to go back in there, all I have to do to remind myself is to look in the mirror and follow the pale red marks that slither their way up my arm and around my neck. My mother used to tell me stories of sirens, specifically the sirens that lived in the lake near the lodge up in Fairbank that her family had owned for a long time. The lodge itself was a bit secluded, almost fully hidden behind an acre of forest. There was one road leading in and out, where the lodge and the lake sat. To be fair, the path we took was more dirt than road, and it was about a 20-minute drive to the nearest town. We went there every summer while I was growing up, and I always tried my best to search for the sirens my mother talked about. She told me time and time again that it was rare to catch such a supernatural sighting. But when the sky rains down and the winds are swift, you might be able to hear them. They sing above the whistle of the air, crying their blessing to the heavens above that water their lake, nourishing their home with its tears, she would say, her eyes glassy as she spoke, a small, serene smile playing over her lips, as if she was replaying a memory in her head. This, however, was not a satisfactory enough answer for an overly curious mind, and during every visit I would grab my scuba goggles and search the waters as much and as long as I could. I was never able to get too far down below the inky darkness was all that I could see, though, the deeper water far too out of reach from the sunlight above. My father, well, he had no time for such nonsense. He would roll his eyes and scoff any time Mother would begin her stories. It would make her brow crinkle, not at all happy with his mockery of the story passed down to her from her mother. However, as I grew older, so too did his annoyance with these so-called fairy tales my mother spun. He'd tell her I was getting too old to believe in such things, that her stories were nothing but bedtime tales for young children. This became one of the many arguments that they had throughout their marriage as time went on. As the years continued to go by, their relationship only seemed to get worse, and I was becoming aware of it quickly. There was always this tenseness that hung heavy in the air whenever they would be in the room together for too long. I would have been too young, but I wasn't blind or stupid. I didn't know exactly why their marriage was deteriorating, and I never thought to ask, as it seemed more like grown-up problems that I wouldn't be able to understand. Maybe over all those years, they had both just become different people, different than they had been when they'd first met, and they were no longer on the same page when it came to life goals. I don't know. Slowly, their disdain for each other became harder and harder to hide from me, though. I could sometimes hear them at night, fighting with each other in the late hours, hushed whispers laced with poison that would leak into my ears through the thin walls of the house. They never knew I listened, and I never said anything as they continued their charade, as if I couldn't see the cracks forming between them. That was another reason I loved the lodge. It was the only place that they never argued, either in front of me or in their room. It was our vacation away from the stresses of the monotony of life. Perhaps it was even a silent agreement between them. When they were at the lodge, they were happy. We were a happy family, or at least we pretended to be. And for a long time, I was okay with pretending we were happy too. The first time I saw a siren on the lake was the day before my mom died. She and Dad had gone for a hike through the forest up in the hills by the cliffs, and I had opted to stay behind. Maybe I'll take a look for sirens again, I joked. Although at 15, I'd given up looking for them a long time ago. I was growing up, after all, and despite my love of my mother's stories, even I was growing to doubt their validity. Dad sighed in annoyance, and Mom put a placating hand on his shoulder to try and ease his frustration. Well, if you find one, I'd love to hear the story when we get back. We should be in well before the storm is supposed to be this evening, Mom had said with a grin. I waved them goodbye as they started their trek and watched them slowly disappear from view as they were swallowed up by the woods surrounding the lake. The sun had been above the trees when they had left. An hour later, when the storm began to quickly move in, they had not yet returned. I was starting to get worried. The wind had become a real tempest out there. I could hear the wailing gusts as they began to whistle over the lodge. The rain began to slap hard against the roof of the lodge as the downpour grew worse. The sky was growing even darker by the minute. I stood to watch at the window, looking for any signs of my parents. Then the lightning struck, lighting the entirety of the ground, yet still no sign of them. I went to the landline, but just as I picked up the phone, the power went out. I tried to phone anyway, but it was dead. My heart began to race, and I panicked, wondering what to do. I could go to the car, go for help in town. I didn't know how to drive, though, but I'd risk it. I knew the way to town, at least. I could get the police and round up a search party. With my mind made up, I grabbed my parka off the coat rack and Dad's keys from the other side, getting ready to face the onslaught of wind and rain that I was sure I'd be fighting every second on the way there. I was running down the front steps to the porch towards Dad's car when I first heard it. It made me stop, dead in my tracks, and I wondered for the briefest second if I was imagining things. High above the screaming wind, there was another sound, an ethereal bell-like ringing dancing across the air. Or was that the sound of someone singing? I slowly turned towards the sound coming from the lake, my heart beating like a drum in my chest, my breath catching quickly in my throat. And there she was, the obsession of my childhood, the creature of the stories I had heard about for so long. I could see her, even through the darkness of the storm. She was above the water from the waist up, the rest of her body hidden below the shadows of the lake. The lightning scattered around the sky in quick succession, showing brief glimpses of the siren's full body in bits and pieces. Mother had said long ago that sirens were not the way they were in the storybooks. They were not beautiful maidens with long, shining hair and warm, supple skin. They looked like the creature before me now. She had no hair at all. Her head was bare and smooth like the rest of her from what I could see. She had chalk-white skin and black, beady eyes that stared me down as she sang. Her lips were thin and horrifyingly wide. She had 2 long rows of teeth that were white as bone, and every single one of them was sharply pointed, almost reminding me of a shark. I'd always expected to be excited if I ever caught a glimpse of a siren, despite being warned of their appearance. But this feeling that was creeping through me was like ice. That wasn't excitement. It was slow dread that was growing and pooling in my stomach as I stared, frozen in place by her song. A dull numbness began to set in, and the sound of the wind began to fade into the background, leaving nothing behind but the beautiful bell-like song. I could feel myself walking away from the car and towards the edge of the lake. I was caught by the bait of her song, and had gotten trapped in the dark abyss of her eyes. A siren's beauty does not come from her body alone. She sings to make you look, and when she catches your eye, that's what ensnares her human prey. Mother would say, snapping her fingers in my face. She would even eat me? I'd asked. Mother had shaken her head, smiling. No, my dear. Not these sirens, at least. Not the ones in our lake. These sirens are different. They will not harm someone of our family line, for we are the ones who brought them here so long ago. We're bound to each other, us and them. She would say that last part in a whisper, as if it was a secret. Maybe it was, as she never spoke about it again. But even now, even remembering her words, I felt a shiver of doom crackle through me as I got closer. The singing got louder, higher, shriller, until it was all I could hear. There was no wind, no rain, no thunder, just her song. I could see her better now as I trudged into the lake, my legs moving forward with a mind of their own. Her skin was like leather. I could see the gums around her white, jagged teeth, and they were all black as coal. Her fingers were long and thin, ending in black, sharp, needle-like points. She looked like my worst nightmare come to life, but still I couldn't pull myself away from her eyes. Her damn eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, to run, but I was at the mercy of this thing. I guess it's true what they say. Be careful what you wish for. Her song stopped mid-note when I finally stepped within her reach. A long, spindly arm snapped out to grab my left wrist, and she lifted it to my line of sight before lifting her other hand and plunging a long black thumbnail into my wrist. Sirens can tell us the future, I remembered, my 10-year-old self asking with excitement. Mother hushed me, for it was long past bedtime, but I had begged for just one more fact that she knew about the sirens. Yes and no. They can't see all, only bits and pieces that don't change no matter what we do or try to prevent it, Mother explained. I held on to that memory even as the shock of pain webbed up through my arm, through my chest, and then into my head. I could see it, what the siren had wanted to share with me, the reason she had called me into the darkness. I screamed, and then it was over. I don't know how long I sat there in the dirt and the mud, the water of the lake gently lapping around my waist as I stared out into the slow, waning storm. The wind had slowed, the rain had gentled, and with the chaos of Mother Nature's ever-changing mood slipping away from whence it came, the siren too disappeared with it, slipping back into the lake without a sound or a ripple, as if she had never been there at all. Heavy footsteps pulled me from my revelry, and I didn't need to turn to see it was my dad, nor did I need to look to know he was alone. When I finally turned to look up at that looming, soaking figure, his face was grim, and his hands were shaking. They'd lost track of the time and had gotten caught at the beginning of the storm. The darkness had overwhelmed them quickly, and even with their flashlights, it was a treacherous journey they had to make back down the trail as they came. Mother had walked a bit too close to the edge of a cliff, and the mud had given way under her steps. Then she fell. Just like that, she was gone. My father was quiet for a while after that. Even at her funeral, he was stoic and cold. I overheard some of the adults talking amongst themselves, telling each other how sad it was that she was gone, and how my father had to be strong for me. We didn't talk much after that day, and we didn't go back to the Fairbanks Lodge for a long time after that either. I never told him what I saw. I knew he'd never believe me anyway. I didn't go back again until I was 19. I took Mom's ashes with me, and I made sure to check the weather report on my app before I went. I waited and bided my time until I knew that it was just the right time. Then I called my dad. I told him I wanted us to spread Mom's ashes in the lake, and I wanted him to be here. He seemed resistant at first, but after a few minutes of begging, he relented. The wind was beginning to gust just as I saw the Jeep pulling up to the lodge. Rain was beginning to pour down harder when he got out. He was running up towards the porch in an attempt to escape the onslaught of the rain. When he stopped, he could hear it in the wind, the beginning of her song. I stood resolutely on the porch, making a point to avoid the view of the lake to my side. I saw him turn to look, and snap, he was snared. I watched him walk to the shoreline, and I watched him walk into the water. I watched until his head disappeared under the waves of the lake, following the heavy, dangerous voice and eyes of the creatures that lived below the darkness of the water. That day, the first day I ever saw a siren, my mom died, but not because she slipped. I know that because I know how she died. The siren showed me. She showed me how my parents began to fight on their hike, a fight bigger than I'd ever seen them have before. She showed me how in a fit of rage, my father had pushed my mother. He pushed her right off that cliff and to her death below, just as I now sent him to his death below. Like father, like daughter, I guess. I finally allowed myself to look towards the lake, my face devoid of emotion, and I saw her that one last time, the siren who snared me so long ago and had let me go. For I was bound to her, and she was bound to me, and she would not harm me, for I was my mother's blood. The same could not be said of my father. She gave me a subtle nod before disappearing beneath the waves again, leaving no evidence of either her or her visit, except the perfectly round white scar that I would bear on my left wrist until the day I met my end. I sighed as the storm continued to howl around me, creating a whistling sound as it ascended to the sky overlooking Fairbank Lodge. Or is that the sound of someone singing, perhaps? My ex-husband always used to jump scare me. It was one of the things I hated the most about him. Well, he's doing it again. The most frustrating part is that he's been dead for 5 years. First, it was just slightly off-putting. It was in the earliest days of dating him. He'd be at my apartment, and I'd excuse myself to use the bathroom. He'd be waiting in some doorway or shadow to jump out and scare the crap out of me. It was even worse at his house. He lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and I was pretty much always low-level scared out there. But then he'd leap out from around a corner, and I'd be so scared I'd pee myself. I'd be ready to break up with him then and there, every time. In retrospect, that's obviously what I should have done. But I guess we all ignore our own inner voices sometimes, don't we? Well, obviously, or there wouldn't be so many people posting on No Sleep, trying to get other people to help them with dire problems they created by doing something stupid. Yet, here we are. I don't know why I let it slide, honestly. And that was only one of the many things about him that was terrible. Nonetheless, I repeatedly told him to cut it out, and I repeatedly did nothing when he failed to cut it out. Eventually, I even married him. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage who stayed with us a lot, and when they were there were also nieces and nephews staying over. I always liked when there was a house full of kids. It made the old, drafty, falling-down farmhouse we lived in slightly less terrifying. But you could count on my ex-husband to screw up a good thing. We were in the living room with all the kids. It was late at night. The kids were all still rowdy and playing around, he and I on the couch. There was a scary movie playing, which nobody was really paying any attention to. But Eric, my ex, got a funny look on his face and said quietly to me, "Watch this." Then he put his fingers to his lips to express that I should keep quiet. I instantly knew he was probably thinking of orchestrating some huge jump scare on all these kids. Even though he had actually given me a warning at least, I just didn't want him to do it. The youngest kid was only 4. I knew it would immediately kill the good vibes. I tried to protest, but he shushed me again, then scurried off to some other part of the house, unnoticed by any of the kids. I sighed angrily. I even tried to warn the kids, but they were all hyper and not really listening. Seconds later, Eric showed up outside the screen door and revved his chainsaw. The kids lost it. One of his daughters actually blasted backwards and got airborne in her desperation to get away from the door. The 4-year-old, of course, burst into hysterical tears, and soon they were all crying. Now, some of you reading this are probably laughing and thinking that's actually pretty funny. But the thing was, it was just so damn old. He did this dumb crap all the time. Plus, the world can really be boiled down into precisely 2 types of people. People who think it's funny to scare 4-year-olds so they cry, and people who don't. So, readers, I suppose you've sorted yourselves into teams at this point. Fast forward a few years from the dumbass chainsaw incident, and Eric and I had a son of our own. The thing about our son was that he had major, and I mean major, heart problems at birth. He had to have open heart surgery, and he had a slew of other complications. No, that's not the point of the story, but just know that the first 8 months of his life were very touch and go. Then he was finally doing better, stronger even, able to do more. He was 9 months old, sitting on my lap, facing me. We were playing and chatting with each other when Eric lunged up behind me, grabbed him, and shouted. My little son did that thing little kids do when, for one full second, you don't know if they're going to burst into hysterical tears or laughter. In the end, my son burst into laughter. So did Eric. I, on the other hand, was livid. Who jump scares an infant, first of all? Secondly, who the hell jump scares an infant heart patient? That was probably the rudest I've ever been to Eric about the jump scare thing. But he just kept laughing. Laughing the whole thing off, like he always did. Anyway, that wasn't why I divorced him. But we were divorced by the time our son was 3. We shared custody, and it went about how you'd expect things to go with a douchebag. But life proceeded, I suppose. When our son was about 10, he went through this phase where he started getting insanely jumpy. I mean, he just seemed incredibly paranoid. If I walked close to him or made any sudden movements, he'd flinch. Almost like he thought I was going to hit him. At first, it actually sort of hurt my feelings. I had never hit my son. I didn't understand why he was being so jumpy with me. Then it started to scare me, because I wondered if someone else was hitting him. Maybe he was being bullied at school. He didn't go to his father's much at all, and I didn't imagine Eric would ever hit him. But, what if? Then I remembered the jump scaring. I finally thought to ask my son about it. He immediately revealed that, yeah, his dad jump scared him. All the time. It's kind of annoying, Mom, he told me. Well, yeah, I thought. I couldn't believe I'd forgotten about it. I was so mad. He only spent limited time with our son. Why was Eric spending it jump scaring him so much that it was making him nervous and anxious all the time? What kind of crap was that? The problem was that Eric was the sort of co-parent that if I asked him for help with anything, or to back me up on anything, he'd do the exact opposite, just to be spiteful. Asking nicely never worked with him. So, if it wasn't something court-ordered, I didn't even really bother asking, because I knew he would just get worse. And let's face it, no family court is going to give a crap about somebody getting scared. I was mad as hell, but there wasn't really much I could do about it. Fortunately, he took the liberty of dying, and that took care of it. I don't mean to sound callous. Obviously, our son struggled with the death of his father, but the jumpiness subsided basically instantly after he found out that his dad was dead. Now, if your child's mental health improves because you die, it's probably because you were a crappy parent. I'm just saying. Anyway, another 5 years went by. Then I wrecked my car because a cat jumped out in front of me. I sat there in shock, gripping the steering wheel of my wrecked car. As I tried to catch my breath and make sense of what had happened, I noticed something strange. The air around me had grown cold, and a chill ran down my spine. I looked around, but no one was there. I tried to shake it off and focus on getting out of the car. But then I heard it. A low, guttural laugh echoed around me, and I froze. It sounded like my ex-husband's laugh. The man who had tormented me for years, emotionally and physically. I felt a surge of anger and fear wash over me, and I knew I needed to get out of there. I managed to escape the car and run to my house, but the eerie feeling never left me. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would hear footsteps in the hallway, even though no one was there. Objects would move on their own, and the temperature would drop suddenly. As I walked by the window glass on the shop on a sunny day, my own reflection seemed to lunge at me, and it scared the life out of me. A drinking glass exploded on the counter. Doors slammed in the night. Books fell from the shelves, landing with a thunk and a plume of dust. As the days passed, I realized that it wasn't just any spirit haunting me. It was my ex-husband. He was using his new ghostly powers to jump scare me from beyond the grave. The realization left me terrified. If he could do all this, what else was he capable of? I tried to find help, but no one believed me. They thought I was just imagining things or suffering from post-traumatic stress. Sleep-deprived and desperate, I found myself in a police station, explaining the whole thing to a frazzled cop. He glared at me tersely, and I ended up feeling like an idiot. A gunshot rang out even as I told my story. The entire precinct jumped at what ended up being a gun going off by accident. Even so, the cop didn't believe me, of course, and sent me out into the rainy night, terrified of my own shadow. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't escape from. Now, as I sit here in my dark and silent house, I can feel his presence all around me. I was awoken moments ago when the bedroom door cracked violently into the wall. I know that at any minute he could jump scare me again, and this time I fear it won't be a harmless prank. I'm sitting here curled in a ball, shaking as I type this. I'm just trying to get it out, trying to leave behind my story, because I know it's only a matter of time until he scares me to death.
The Humvee's brakes squealed as the driver downshifted to take a sharp right. Then we came to a stop. "All right, gents, you know the drill," Sergeant Stafford yelled out. This was the 19th house search we'd had today, and quite frankly, we were all getting sick of it. My boots hit the sand, and I slung my rifle over, getting a good grip on it. An exhalation of exhaustion and boredom was heard from all the guys as we approached the door. "You think we'll catch this one red-handed, Ellis?" Ray grinned at me. "Oh yeah, pants around his ankles and all. God, I felt embarrassed for that guy." We stacked up for our routine formation at the door. Corporal Martinez approached the front, lowering his rifle. He took a quick charge up and punted the door wide open. "Move, move, move!" I swung around the right corner, scanning the area, and I had Ray on my rear checking the front. It was a kitchen area. Busted cupboards, disgusting-looking tiles. The whole place reeked of old carpet and mold. I felt Ray's hand on my rig, indicating for me to press on. I rushed forward in a controlled manner and felt the 6 pairs of footsteps trailing behind me. The living room was clear, and we headed for the stairs, located at the far left. I heard some rummaging upstairs, so I indicated to Sergeant Stafford in the rear to swap me out. I quickly rushed along the right side of the column, swapping with Private Ashford, who carried the team's big-ass shotgun. Ashford excitedly raised his weapon, waiting for the tap. I was now in the 4th position, carefully threading into the stack. My eyes were constantly darting left and right, looking for the open back door or window or what have you. We started moving up the stairs, hugging the wall tightly. Reaching the turn in the staircase, Ashford confidently swung the corner. Having a little visibility over Mendez's shoulder, I saw him freeze. His face turned pale in a matter of seconds, the clacking of his rifle sling indicating his violent shaking. Ashford moved to the fore, 6 shots fired in the direction of something upstairs. Contact! Private Watford swung around Ashford to provide greater suppression fire and move up the stairs to unclog the stack. An ear-piercing sound came from upstairs, the chaos ensuring the formation was disoriented, along with the noise, and I began to feel nauseous. Grabbing Martinez's collar, I tugged him down the stairs to free the staircase for engagement. As we were moving down the stairs, I caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a woman, entirely covered in bullet holes, dashing towards Ashford. Click, click, click. His gun ran dry, and it was already too late. The hellish creature, dripping blood and having a few pieces of meat barely holding its limbs together, closed the distance between him and snapped his neck with an inhuman amount of force. A magazine dumped by Watford led him to the same fate. Having it turned towards us, I caught some details of what it looked like. Its face was hollow, cheeks sunken in, eye sockets empty. Saying it was pale would be an understatement. Freakishly skinny, and tall, completely destroyed by bullet holes. Its nails were probably the size of half a knife. Our whimpers and curses were muffled by the sound of the automatic fire and ejecting magazines. It was not phased. "Get down!" The familiar sound of a grenade being ejected from the grenade launcher tube echoed from behind me. I dove to the left, managing to pull Martinez down just in time, and an explosion followed. Then, it was just darkness. My ears were ringing, face full of dust. Aching pain in my left leg stuck as I attempted to get up. I slowly opened my eyes, glaring at the flickering light from the ceiling. I glanced to my right, but Martinez wasn't there. That's when I spotted all the bodies. Sergeant Stafford, Corporal Smith, PFC Erutious. I whimpered in fear as I dragged my ass towards the wall, breathing heavily. I felt my rifle under my right hand and gripped it tight. Another detailed look towards the deceased, and I spotted Martinez too. Hunched over on a chair, head hung backwards, throat slashed open. Ray. I didn't see Ray anywhere. I had to find him. I pulled myself up, nearly collapsing. A quick glance down towards my knee revealed the issue. A huge piece of debris had lodged itself in there. I pulled it out, letting out a groan and a few quick breaths. Dragging that leg behind and pushing myself off the wall, I started moving upstairs. "Ray! Where are you, man?" I turned the corner of the stairs and realized why Ashford froze. The upstairs area was a large living room. In there, neatly arranged, were about 14 to 15 chairs. Sitting in them with perfect posture were corpses. The corpses of recon squads that went missing earlier today. In the farthest chair to the right, I spotted Ray. He was alive. Started making my way up the stairs, and I saw his eyes widen and his lips attempt to say something. "I'm coming, man. Just hold on." "Ellis, on the ceiling." My blood ran cold and my eyes widened. In a split second, my heart rate doubled, and I was clenching my jaw so hard I could have easily broken it. Slowly, raising my glance and rifle towards the ceiling, I saw it. Head slightly tilted to the right, hanging onto the ceiling with those ridiculously long legs. Its thinning hair hung down, drenched in blood, inches from my face. It let out a sickening gurgle or a groan before striking at me. I woke up in one of those chairs. I glanced to my left and noticed Ray wasn't there. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the next room. I dove out the window and crawled away, giving it a quick glance backwards. It was staring at me, its hollow face replicating what would have been a smile on a human. Its arms moved up, raising something. I caught a glance of a familiar blonde head. "Ray, I'm so sorry, man."
Have you ever found something that's just incredible? Something so unreal, you can't help but wonder what event led to this item becoming intertwined with you. I'm not talking about a bottle cap or a piece of a plow. Hell, I'm not even talking about a pistol I found buried in the dirt when I was a kid. I'm talking about something mind-boggling. Not sure if that's the right word. Enough talking about it, though. Time to give you the story about my recent discovery. Most mornings during the fall, I deer hunt. Before you all jump down my throat about it, I only kill 2 a year. Only enough for me to eat. Times are tough, and a guy's gotta eat, you know? After I catch my 2, however, I still make my way out to my stand a few times a week. I enjoy sitting up there in the cool fall air, taking it all in. It's me and nature. No phones, no one, no real-life stuff. Plus, I enjoy seeing the deer, even if I'm not shooting at them. It was one of those days that I was sitting in the stand, taking in the sunrise when I heard it. Well, I guess I don't have to ask if that's the one that made the noise, I thought to myself, chuckling and betting with myself which tree fell this time. I'm sure it's that dead one that's right next to the fence this time. It's been on its last limbs for years. With my curiosity piqued and the sunrise over, I decided to climb down the stand and start my trek home. With my pack clinging to my shoulder and a pistol on my side, I made my way towards home while keeping an eye out for the fallen tree. Every tree I passed boosted my confidence in my assertion that the old dead tree finally gave way. Shortly after I find the old tree laying on its side, I take a little pride in my skill with assumptions. As I walk by, however, I notice that the tree is hollow on the inside, and the tree collapsed in on itself as it fell. Looking at the poor old tree, that's when I see it. The stump of the tree was not hollow. It's solid like a normal tree. Odd, I think. Termites must have gotten to it after it dried out. But the stump had something sitting inside of it. It's shards of some kind of pot. An old clay pot that was placed in this tree for a long time. Long enough for the tree to grow around it. How did that even happen? Thoroughly intrigued, I look through the pieces of the clay shattered in the stump, and the first thing that sticks out is it isn't clay. It's a piece of cloth, and a piece of thin rope around a circular piece of clay, which I presume was the top of the pot. The other eye-catching part of this is a large, round, flat piece of clay that appears to be the bottom of the pot. I know what you're thinking. Wow, pots have bottoms. What a fascinating thing to realize. Well, smartass, it's not that it's a bottom. Obviously, it has a bottom, but the symbol on the bottom is what caught my eye. A 5-pointed star with a tiny small star in each of the triangles of the star's end. A squiggly symbol, maybe meant to look like smoke if you squint at it just right. The engraving wasn't perfect. Still, it's a pretty interesting thing to put on the bottom of a clay pot. Even more so when you seal the pot with a cloth and put it in a tree. I decided to take it with me. At the very least, it would be an interesting trinket to show everyone at my dinner party. While putting the piece in my bag, one of the shards pricked my finger, letting a little drop of blood roll into the pack with the pieces. Once the house was in sight, I was thinking of one thing. Is this pot worth something? It's clear that this thing is a relic, so who's to say it's not valuable to some institution or study or museum or another? Unsure of what to make of something's value, I decided to examine the piece again and see if I can find any clues to help me identify who made this thing and what it is. My immediate guess was that it was Native American or something. Did they even have clay-making abilities? Adding that to the list of things to Google when I got home. After a thorough inspection, I can't find anything that sets this apart from a standard clay pot at any store that sells clay pots, other than its weathered exterior. As I sat looking at it, I tried to piece things together in my mind. My mind jumps to, it looks like a pot from Zelda, but something tells me it probably looks a little different, what with its lack of cell shading and all. After noticing that I've been staring at these pieces for hours, I decide it might be time to put some effort somewhere else for the rest of the day. Nothing bothers me about the puzzle that's unfinished. It sticks in the back of my mind all day, thinking about what it could be. As I lay down in bed that night, I'm still thinking about that damn pot with the symbol, and it just doesn't make any sense. As I drift off to sleep, I see myself in a dream. Myself in a bed. My point of view in the dream is from the bedroom ceiling. My body lays there, still softly breathing in and out. That's when I see it, out of the corner of my eye. It's a figure. Short, pudgy man, slowly walking towards the bed. Not short, like short, like he couldn't see over the bed short. He waddled towards my unconscious body, all the while chanting, "I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming." Panicked, but unable to do anything, I watch as he puts his chubby little hand on the foot of my bed and pulls himself up. He peeks up onto the bed, and I feel violated as he looks at me, scanning my body with some kind of pleasure in his eye. I say eye because he only has the one in the middle of his round thumb head. Right as he's getting on top of me, he turns to look at me. Not the me in the bed, but the me in the ceiling, watching the horror unfold, all the while continuing to whisper. Leaping out of my bed, I realized it was only a dream. Wiping the sweat off my face and trying to catch my breath, my throat screams in pain and feels like I've swallowed a razor blade. Like I had my mouth open all night. Nothing some cough medicine wouldn't fix, I supposed. I jumped in the shower because I guess in all the excitement over the pot I forgot to take one last night and had dirt all over my clothes. Not even sure where I'd picked up that much dirt. Onward the day goes as I try to get this damn pot out of my head when it dawns on me. My brother was a history major in college. Maybe he'd know something about it. I take a picture of the symbol and give him a brief synopsis on what happened. It's almost no time before he texts me back, asking if I'm being for real. Why would I make this up? I reply back, annoyed at him obviously knowing something and not telling me. I can't be 100% sure, but from the evidence, I would say you found a witching pot, brother. Don't keep me in suspense, you know I don't have a clue what you're talking about. It's a pot for witch catching, you muggle. I'm serious, Zeke. Tell me what this thing is, please. Okay, I'm just messing with you. It's an ancient tradition that goes all the way back to the Romans, I think. When bad stuff was happening, they would do some kind of ritual and trap the insert bad thing here into the pot. Like Ganon, basically. That's encouraging, but I don't think the Romans were chilling in America. It goes back to the Romans, but the tradition has been around for all kinds of civilizations. African tribes, Chinese, Vikings, basically any civilization you can think of has something similar to it. Logically, the Native Americans probably did the exact same thing. They would make a container for evil forces and put the symbol of the earth spirit on the bottom of the container. I guess it worked like a magnet to lure it in. The thing usually gets trapped in the container and happily ever after for the good people. Okay, that doesn't really help, but at least I know what it is now. Thanks. Let me know if any evil spirits run around your house. So, as you probably guess, I wasn't really concerned about this, but it did make me a little unnerved given the dream I'd had. Everything he said made some kind of sense. The symbol at the bottom was some kind of witch, demon, or hell, maybe some disease that was running through the people. They sealed the pot up with cloth and set it on the altar or something made out of the tree. Some years later, you get a tree with a pot in it. My throat continued to burn throughout the day with no help from the medicine. I finally stopped fighting it, and after a few hours I went back to bed, hoping to sleep it off. I woke up from an apparent nightmare that I can't remember having, but I do recognize that I'm talking as I awake. I hear myself mutter, "I'm here," but I don't have time to think about it before it hits me. Pain. Hot, sharp pain runs through my arms. That's when I realize I'm standing in my living room, over my living room table, the table with the pot. Except I've used the piece in my hand to carve a 5-pointed star on my forearm. I drop the shard of bloody clay and run to the bathroom to get a towel. It's only skin deep, but I'm bleeding like a son of a gun. As the bleeding stops, my mind catches up to the last few minutes of my life. I was carving that symbol into my arm. Why the hell was I doing that? I decided the pot was going in the trash. Bagging it up, I walked out the door with the clay remains. Still, my mind was coming back to what my brother had said. It was used to trap something bad. It was holding something bad, and the tree falling broke its prison. And there I went, stumbling along like an unlucky penny I am, and picked up the pot. He's coming. My unconscious mind tried to warn me of what was happening. Too dumb to realize, though. As I walked back in the house from throwing the pot in the trash, that was when I realized it. I was still holding the bag in my hand. I hadn't done anything with it. I can't make my hand let go. It won't let go of the bag. No matter how hard I tried, it won't let go. Not even when I jabbed at the star-shaped cut in my arm. Trembling with pain, it still held on. I got back to the table, and my arm seemed to work as normal as it dropped the pieces back where they'd been. I decided to write this all out, because what else am I going to do? I can't leave or fight. How can I fight something living in my body? I wanted to see my brother, but I can't. I won't do that to him. I'm not going to put him at risk if this thing can go from me to him. No way. Of course, I don't know if that's how this works at all, or if he goes wherever he wants to. Whoever reads this shall be my plaything. I picture it saying that as it watches me type this out. Hell, maybe it's even making me type this out. Maybe this is what he wants. Maybe it thrives off people knowing about him and being scared of him. I'm talking crazy now. I just wanted to tell you guys what happened so you know if you find something similar. I don't know what you could do to avoid it, obviously, so I guess I really don't have a point to writing this. Actually, when did I decide to write this? How long have I been writing this? I don't even remember the things here happening at all. I was just walking back from hunting and I saw that a tree had fallen. What's going on? I know I can't stop myself from posting this because it's not me actually typing. It's gotta be him. I'd say don't read this, but since this is the end, I'm assuming you already have. I'm sorry for that. Honestly, maybe nothing will happen to you, but if it does, I can't help but think of my own preservation and wonder if he'll leave me alone if he jumps to someone else. I can't stop from posting this if I wanted to anyway, so I guess I'll hope for the best. I think I'm fixing to go back to sleep, and this might be the last time. I'm sorry to whoever sees this, but I think he's here.